Good evening, welcome to another edition of the Gersnet Podcast, the independent Rangers podcast by fans for fans, where all the content is absolutely free, coming to you in association with Forrest Precision Engineering. I'm your host tonight, Brian Archer, and as always, would encourage you to get onto the Gersnet website and check out our forums for all your latest Rangers news and discussion. We're live tonight on the YouTube channel, and we'd ask that you continue to share the pod on social media, spread the word, and please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Before I introduce my guest for tonight, I need to give another mention to our partners over at Forrest Precision Engineering. We're a Glasgow-based engineering company who have been a big commercial supporter of Rangers for a number of years, and we're delighted to have them supporting the pod. If you want more information on them, please visit their website at www.forestprecisioneng.com. They also have a stunning executive lounge in the Ibrox main stand, and for more information on that, email the club at hospitality@rangers.co.uk. Right now, to bring my guest, joining me tonight is Rob Fawcett. Rob, how's things on this transfer deadline day?
Hey, aye, it's good, mate. It's good. Don't think we're going to have much to talk about tonight. It's been a bit quiet on the old Rangers news front over the last week or so, but I'm sure we'll figure out a few things to talk about. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm sure we'll find a few things to talk about. Before we get on to all matters transfers, the first thing I wanted your take on was the Scotland squad announcement earlier in the week, and mostly on the fact that there was no inclusion for Conor Barron. He was kind of widely tipped to have earned himself a call-up. Were you surprised he didn't make the cut?
Um, I wasn't surprised, no, because of who we've got as manager. Because let's face it, he doesn't exactly like trying new things, does he? I think the fact that after the clamour for Ryan Gold to be called up, and the fact that that's him just being called up after a couple of years is probably testament to how long it's probably going to take Barron to get into the full team. He's obviously been a mainstay and has been called up for the under 21s, but yeah, I wasn't exactly surprised, especially when you see Liam Kelly being dropped from the squad after being almost an ever present in it when he played for Motherwell. Don't want to make any correlations about him signing for a new club in the summer, but it's just a coincidence that all of a sudden he's deemed not good enough to be part of the Scotland setup.
Yeah, it was definitely a strange one. Just on Conor Barron, we were talking about, what have you made of his start to life at Rangers?
Well, I thought that he would be a decent player for us. I didn't actually expect the impact that he would have to show so quickly. And I don't know if it's a combination of just his attitude and how coming to a club like Rangers just hasn't phased him, or whether it was that we were missing that type of energy, drive, and kind of terrier-like presence in the midfield. But I mean, you could argue the fact that he's probably been or been close to being man of the match in every single game he's played for us. And I kind of jokingly stuck my line in the sand before he kicked about to say he was going to be the Scottish Young Player of the Year. And to be fair, based on the performances that he's put in, if that continues and he improves as the team improves, then I don't think he'll be far off the voting. To be honest, he's been really good. What I would love to see, and again, maybe that will come in depending on how we end up setting up and whether we can free him up to go forward a little bit, is maybe a couple more goals to his game, because we've seen sparks of it where he isn't shy to push forward and have a dig from range. And I think if he could add that to his game, what a player we'll have. But really, really excited by the start he's made and how he looks as if he's played for the club for the last kind of 3 or 4 years. And what I love as well is the fact he's no scared to let people know when they're not doing their job. He is kind of in their face and taking at such a young age that leadership role to kind of pull people up. He's not immune to making mistakes. Again, I think we've got to remember that he's only 21, so we need to not expect him to be maybe 7, 8, 9 out of 10 every week, and there might be a week where he has a bad game, but certainly he's been one of the brightest sparks in the Rangers team since we've come back for the summer.
Yeah, he just looks born to play for Rangers. He looks completely unfazed by the fact that he knows he's at a bigger club. And we've seen players, come and play for Rangers before and almost shrink as soon as they put on that jersey. And he just doesn't look anything like that. He looks as if he's grown as soon as he's put on the jersey almost. And the thing that I'm most excited about is the fact that, this is him just getting started. He's, as you said, he's a young boy. Imagine the improvement that's still to come from him. And if he continues on that trend, I mean, potentially what a player you've got in your hands there.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it comes back to everything that we've spoken about previously. Those are the types of player that we need to be bringing to the club. Somebody that's young, hungry, has got a point to prove, that we can get at a relatively low cost. Again, we don't know how much that's going to be because we've still got the tribunal to kind of set the fee. But they're the players you're going to make your best return on. Him, Diamandi, potentially Raskin, once he comes back into the team and kind of gets a bit clear of injury. Those are the people that you can invest in and hopefully get a better return to then reinvest in the team and continue to get the quality. All the good teams that I remember growing up in Rangers had a really good core of Scottish players in it. They understood what it meant to play for the badge, and it's a market that we need to get better at playing in. We've got other players out there, the likes of Lennon Miller at Motherwell and Watson at Kelly, who are players that we should be going after and targeting as Rangers. We've always done that. We've always taken the best talent from Scotland, and it's something we need to get better at. And I think there was always a snobbery about signing Scottish players because they were deemed not, kind of fanciful enough for people. But they get what it means. They'll give you that bit of extra dig, and that's what we've been missing. So it's good to see him through the door. And as you say, I think hopefully stays injury free and continues to kind of improve at the rate that he has shown so far. Anyway.
Yeah, you're right. I always remember when Walter Smith came back for his second spell. That was like my era following Rangers growing up, and the first thing he did when he came back was build a spine of a team full of Scottish players: Davy Weir, Lee McCulloch, Stephen Naismith, Kevin Thompson, etc. So definitely agree with you. It's definitely something we need to get better at, and we can't be, looking down our nose at players from our own league. Now, before we talk about bringing players in, I wanted to chat about some of the players that have left this week. Firstly, player that's just announced as having left, although it's been rumoured for a few days now, is Todd Cantwell. Obviously, we know the kind of story around Cantwell this summer that he asked to leave, and that's now been confirmed that he's off to Blackburn. How do you look back on his time at Rangers?
I think disappointment is probably the word that I could use. I really liked Cantwell as a player. Out of the current crop, up until this season, I probably had him down as my favourite player just because of the technical ability that he had. I think the big problem with Cantwell is the fact that he had probably all the talent in the world, but by the looks of it, an absolutely stinking attitude to go with it. And it's fine going on a run when the league's lost and scoring a few goals and getting a few assists, etc. But for me, he's the type of player that should be impacting the big games. And I cannot remember, a really important game where we had something on the line that Cantwell grabbed it by the scruff of the neck and, drove us to a result, drove us to a victory. And I think for him, hopefully he can learn a lesson from it. But as he's shown from his Norwich days as well, he kind of leaves clubs under a cloud. He likes to, I know people will get triggered by the Instagram posts, etc. But it comes back to the attitude side of things. For me, you can make those posts and make that type of comment every day of the week when you're winning things. But when you've won nothing in your career, you should clamp it and focus on turning it on in the pitch. And that was the biggest disappointment for me, I think. I'm not surprised that he's left because you could see that I think him and Clement obviously didn't see eye to eye. And it's a shame because there was a really good creative player in there. Probably somebody that we could have used within the team. But, the whole failure of his career, to me, lies squarely on the shoulders of Todd Cantwell. He's the one that will never play for a bigger club than Rangers. And you can see from the fact that it's Blackburn that he's gone to, and there was nobody really else sniffing about there. And it will be because of all that baggage and negativity that surrounds him.
Yeah, that was going to be my next point around the kind of lack of interest in him and the level of club that he's ended up at. Is essentially, they've been a kind of mid-table championship club the last few years. They're not a club expected to go and, be pushing for automatic promotion or anything like that. So that kind of tells a story in itself, to be honest. In terms of the fee that we've got for him, it's rumoured to be around £600,000. Was this just a case of take whatever you could get and get him off the wage bill, or should we have held out for more?
I think we were in a difficult position when you hear how the manager spoke about him, and I think this is probably something that we've got to do a little bit better of when we're getting rid of players. And I'll use that mob across the city as an example. Mikey Johnson was never going to play for them, but they've managed to get best part of £2.5–3 million. Now, albeit he did have a successful loan spell at West Bromwich Albion last year and played pretty well for them. For me, 600k is nowhere near what we should be getting for Cantwell. But the fact that he's a player that didn't want to be here, probably on a really large sum of the wages to get that off the wage bill, goes some way, I guess, to freeing up funds so that we can bring other players in. So it's better than giving them away for free or paying them off like we maybe would have done under previous regimes. But you've got to think that for a player with his ability, we could have got more than 600 grand for him. And I think that's the biggest disappointment as well, is that, we kind of almost signalled we were desperate to get rid of him. And that probably put others in a bit of a stronger bargaining position. I guess the other thing is we've maybe had to take that lower fee so that the other club could pay the wages. Because ultimately that's going to be the other big impact is the fact that he's maybe on a 25–30 grand a week, and Blackburn maybe didn't want to pay that. So
yeah, for me it's disappointing because when we signed Cantwell, I think we all said, this is a player we should be making massive profits on when we do eventually move him on, and it's kind of unfortunate that hasn't happened. But to be honest, it's down to Cantwell himself that's been the case. Another player that's left is Scott Wright. He's moved to Birmingham. Was this just a case of, Scott Wright tried his best? I mean, it wasn't really his fault that, Rangers signed him and he wasn't quite at the required level. But was it just best for all parties that he moved on at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think Scott Wright got a lot of stick for fans, which was really unfortunate. He's never once run his mouth. He's come in. He's worked hard as a player. I don't think you could ever accuse him of lack of effort when he stepped on the pitch. I think the comment I made on Twitter earlier was the problem was that Scott Wright's body was too quick for his brain, and you can probably see that in a lot of the play. I think when you purely look at it from a numbers point of view, he got nowhere near the kind of goal return or assist return that we should have got from a player like him. But managers continued to pick him, so he was obviously good to have around the place. I think the other thing we need to remember is, from a European squad point of view, we have to have homegrown players there. So that's probably another reason why he's had to stick about for as long as he has done, because we've needed that. Otherwise, we're then giving up even more space in those Euro squads when it comes to selections. Scott Wright will go to Birmingham with my best wishes. He scored a goal in a cup final to win us the Scottish Cup. I think we need to remember that. It's not his fault that he maybe didn't have the talent required to make it at Rangers. And I think the fact that he's gone demonstrates that there is a bit of a changing of guard within the squad. I don't think Clement has rated these players that has gone out the door, and hopefully it's the beginning of standards rising again. Although we might not see it directly straight away, but it might take us a couple of windows. But at least we're not going to be carrying them as squad players anymore.
Yeah. Another player whose kind of situation's a bit more complicated, or it seems to be, is Yanis Hadji. Now, as we speak, he's still a Rangers player. Could, I guess, change in the next couple of hours before the window shuts. But there's been a lot said about Hadji and by Hadji himself throughout this summer. He came out on Instagram earlier in the week saying that he'd never asked to leave when he was ready to play. Although I do remember he was quoted before the Euros as saying that he was looking to move on. So there's a bit of a contradiction there, but where do you stand on the Hadji debate? Is it better that we try and find them another club at this point?
I think the problem is he had an offer and didn't want to take it, and for the looks of it, that was the only team that was interested. So we've got two options at this point. We pay him off, we make him a free agent, and he can go and find himself a club that way. Or depending on how many players we're able to get through the door, he gets reintegrated back into the squad. Now there obviously has to be a conversation that takes place because in his post he kind of intimated that whatever blockers are in the way, if people talk about it, then they can be worked on. But I do agree with what you were saying there. He's kind of pushed conflicting messages out. On one hand, he was quite happy to look for an alternative club, and I think his post on Instagram the other night was more of a kind of way for him to start the reconciliation process because he realised that he probably wasn't going to get the move that he was expecting. So he needs to try and play his way back into the manager's thoughts. The one thing that I will say about Hadji, to his credit, versus Campbell, who's just left, is the fact that he has at least been playing for the B team, which demonstrates at least a willingness that he's happy to kind of try and earn his money. But I think we need to remember that Hadji as a player is limited as well. Now we could argue the toss over what happened last year with him going on loan to Alaves, etc., especially after him coming back from a kind of serious injury. There's no doubt that he's got ability, and whether that can be utilised in the system that Clement was trying to play remains to be seen. But if we're going to be paying his wages, we should be playing him, as long as it's not going to trigger an increase to the extent that's been rumoured. And I think that will be the thing that ultimately stops him, unless there can be a middle ground that's found.
For you and what we've seen of Hadji, I guess, post-injury, is he, at this point, do you think he's good enough to get a place in the squad, or has his career seems to have taken a bit of a nosedive since that injury? He's kind of struggled to get any kind of regular game time. Have we just kind of almost moved beyond them at this point?
I don't know. I think if you look at the performances he put in at the Euros, I thought he actually looked okay. And if you were to give me that player over the likes of a Tom Lawrence, I would probably take that Hadji. Now, whether that's just seeing him in a microcosm of 2 or 3 games at the Euros or not, but I think the next man that is going to come in the fire is Mr. Lawrence, and I think Hadji would definitely offer us something different. I think he can pick a good pass. The other thing is he's dangerous from distance as well. You look at some of the goals he scored against the likes of Braga, etc. They've all been from outside the box. So if he's going to be here, I'd like to see him given a bit of a chance, because I think there's definitely a player there. The big question mark over Hadji has always been his speed, and whether he's got enough pace to kind of play in the kind of system that we're going to be moving forward. But like I say, if we don't get rid, then he's definitely somebody that we should be trying to reintegrate into the squad and at least have there training. See if he can improve under Clement and fit into the system that he's going to play. If nothing else, it gives us an extra body when we inherently get injuries in the team.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting one to see what happens. I think there's no kind of concrete rumours around him leaving, so if I was to put my money on it, I would kind of put my money on him still being a Rangers player after 11 p.m. tonight. So it'll be interesting to see what the manager decides to do in terms of reintegrating him.
Yeah.
Now, on to incoming players or potential incoming players. Before we talk about specifics, the manager had mentioned after the game last weekend that he expected, more incomings than outgoings, and that's kind of potentially came back to haunt him a bit. Do you think we maybe just took that a bit too literally?
I don't know, because again, I think the manager's expectation is that he might have been getting more bodies through the door, and I think this comes back to, I guess, part of the frustration with the fans at the moment is and I know there's been some articles and stuff done about it where it almost feels like the board are kind of sending the players, the squad and the manager into a battle for the title with both hands tied behind their back this year because of the lack of investment and quality in the team. And it's taken us a little bit of time to get players shifted out the door to free up wages and I guess potentially to free up funds to bring others in. So Clement might have been saying, look, if I get rid of 3 players, then I'm hopefully going to get 4 or 5 in the door because that's what he's been told by the higher ups. And I think there's definitely a feeling amongst the fans at the moment that there's a bit of distrust because of the lack of transparency from the board. I think had they been open about the state of play for the summer, what the recruitment process was going to look like, I think we would have been a bit more understanding. Some of us probably wouldn't have been, but the majority of fans would at least taken that as a positive that there was communication between the board and the fans. The fact that we still don't have a CEO in place when there was meant to be announcements imminently, that's a critical position to run a bloody football club, and we don't have one. There's been a lack of investment in the playing squad over a number of years, which has led us to doing as big a rebuild as we are doing. So Clement sometimes could be a little bit too open in some of those pressers, and the words may well come back to haunt him. But he's ultimately feeding what he's hearing in conversations from the likes of Coppin and the board. He'll identify the areas that he needs to strengthen within the squad, and it's up to them to fill them. So I think from my point of view, I wouldn't be having a go at the manager too much as to questioning why the board would extend the contract of a manager and then not give him the tools to do his job effectively. We've got a couple of new signings to the door, but I still think most fans think we're light in midfield and we need a player there. And in January we're probably looking for another striker, and I would probably say that the majority of fans feel that we're still looking for another striker. But it'll be interesting to see. We've got an hour and a half left of the window. 11 o'clock. Maybe we might get 5 players for Newcastle again.
As long as they're better than the last 5 they sent up. You mentioned there around kind of still needing strength in certain positions. Is it a worry for you how many players that we've reportedly been linked with but missed out on in this window? Now, I know you're not going to get every player you're linked with, and also there's a high chance that a lot of these players we're linked with is just paper talk and agents and there's nothing really in it. But for me, there does seem to be quite a high number of players that, from reliable sources, we've been kind of really interested in. I'm thinking guys like, is it Kabadai from Bayern Munich, who was rumoured to be shown around the training ground, Hannibal from Manchester United, who we were interested in Soke yesterday, who we were credited with a real interest in, but we've missed out on all of them. Is it a worry for you? These types of situations seem to be more regular these days, and is it maybe a consequence of the league that we're playing in? We're seeing a lot of these players go to smaller clubs but in bigger leagues.
I'll probably answer that in 2 parts, mate. To be honest, I made a comment earlier on Twitter around this very point. I think there's a lot of noise when it comes to recruitment for a club like Rangers these days, where there's probably a lot of mainstream media people and accounts on Twitter that just like to throw names about, and I don't believe half the links that of players that we've been linked to. I think ultimately the only people that really know who have been real targets and who we've been after are Coppin and the teams that are doing the negotiation. There will no doubt be players that we miss out on. Absolutely. I think there's 2 things for that. Ultimately, we haven't been winning things, which is the first point. I think it's much easier to attract players to a club where you've got a real chance of winning silverware and you don't have the noise that's going on around the club as we have had over the summer with stadium moves and all that sort of stuff. And then you're right, I think the quality of league plays a massive part in being able to attract players, because historically the only way we've been able to attract those types of player is by offering the inflated wages that has got us into the position where we're scrambling to get rid of the likes of Ben Davies and your Todd Cantwells of the world. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. Now, it could well be that we've missed out on some of those targets simply because of the fact we've said, no, this is going to be the structure of the wage that we're willing to pay because of the league that we're in. And if you accept that, happy days. If not, then we'll move on to a different target. Eventually the truth will come out and it'll probably be somewhere in the middle. But for me, I think it's just a harsh reality of where we are as a club just now. For people coming into the club across Europe, they probably look at the league rather than name Rangers and don't get the history and the expectation that we have as a club and the things that we've won and they probably just see it as, I don't really want to move to Scotland. I'll go to Norwich in the Championship because there's a better pathway to the Premiership there and they can offer me more money. You look at Birmingham, what are they, League One, and they're looking at signing players for 9-10 million quid. That's the harsh reality of living next to multiple leagues in England where they do have lots of money floating about because of the amount of money that the Premier League takes in and the way that it gets spread down through the league. So I don't think that'll change. I think casting our nets wider, so the fact that we have been looking at different markets has been pretty pleasing to me. The fact that we've signed players from, Colombia, Morocco, when we eventually ever see Ignomani, Holland, I think markets where we haven't really shopped, we're not relying on paying mega bucks to players at the Championship level to come and play for us, because ultimately the wage bill has got to come down. We have to get more sustainable as a club, but equally we need to make sure that we identify a few more hidden gems.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, the fact that we're hamstrung by the league that we're in to a certain extent means we need to shop a bit smarter. And speaking of shopping a bit smarter, first signing of deadline day was announced just a few hours ago. Now, I'm going to have a bash at pronouncing this name. I'm absolutely going to butcher it, but here we go. It's Dutch defender Casanwiro has arrived on loan from Feyenoord. Now, thank you. Now, it seems like, based on what I've kind of read on Twitter and things, that he's played more of his football at right back, but can also play centre back. What do you make of this one? I was expecting, a dominant centre back to come in. This one appears where he can play in both positions, so it's a bit of an interesting one for me.
I think it is. I think it's going to be interesting to see how we continue to play. Obviously, against Ross County the weekend, there was a definite shift in Tav's position. He was coming much more inside the pitch into centre mid, and you had Sterling or Barron dropping back into fill his role. I think don't know much about him. I think you're right. He can play as both right centre back and right back. I liked the interview that he gave where asked about his strengths. He likes to play with the ball, win his duels, and he's fast and he's strong. So you can't ask a defender to be much more than that. Again, don't want to get too into the YouTube clips and all that sort of stuff, but he looks as if he is strong. I think I seen him score an absolutely worldie with his left foot from the edge of the box, which would be great if a right back or a right centre half can do that on a bit more of a regular basis. So you never know, he might be the Dutch Bugera. We'll wait and see how he fits into the team. But I think it's good that he's got that versatility. But again, I think it was only against Ross County, but Sterling dropped back into that centre half position. So the fact that we've got players that can play in multiple positions, especially if we're going to be running quite a tight squad, certainly gives us options. And hopefully it also then starts to give Tav a bit of competition, because I think everybody coming into this season, even if you were the biggest fan of Tav, knew that he'd lost a yard and that he was potentially starting to go on the downslope. So we can begin to rotate him a little bit more and give him a rest, because he's been playing 50 odd games a year since he came. at some point you need to give your body a rest. And the more that we can rotate him out of the team and keep him fresh and hopefully then contributing like he has been doing over the last few years, it'll be interesting. So I'm looking forward to seeing him play. I think he should hopefully be fit enough to be involved fairly soon. Whether he's going to get flung into the deep end on Sunday, I don't think that will happen because Clement is a very, very conservative manager when it comes to that sort of stuff. But God forbid, I hope it doesn't take us about 3 or 4 weeks to see him in the team. It'd be good to start to get sight of him in the next few weeks.
Yeah, I think once he gets that IKEA furniture built, we'll be in the team in no time. But I think it might be a bit too soon for Sunday, if we're all being honest. But we'll see. Um, Another player who's not quite confirmed yet, but all reports seem to indicate that this one's looking like it's almost over the line is Nedum Bajrami of Sassuolo, and this one would be a permanent deal. Um, he's a number 10, and most people will probably remember him for that goal for Albania against Italy at Euro 2024. Now, given how important that we know the number 10 position is in Clement's system, is this the exact profile of player that we need?
I think again, I haven't seen a lot of him to be honest, Brian. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be an expert on Italian or Albanian football. I did read a good interview with Perini about him because he's part of the Albanian coaching team, and I think from what he said is that he's a player that can kind of get fans up off their seats. He can play across the kind of left wing, right wing 10 spots. He does like to have a shot from distance. He comes alive in the opposition box. So, I think all of that sounds really, really promising. I think it's going to be interesting to see, how quickly we can get him into the squad and into the team. But the only concern that I had from that interview with Perini was there was a comment about his lack of work rate, which I don't think Clement would stand for. So if we're going to spend €4 million on this guy, then I hope to God that we've clarified that isn't going to be an issue moving forward. But I think it's certainly an interesting one. By all accounts, he played fairly well in a Sassuolo team who didn't do very well in Serie A, obviously being relegated to Serie B last year. So it'll be interesting to see how he does once he's signed.
Yeah, Frankie's actually just messaged me in the chat to say that we're now being linked with Samuel Edozie, a 21-year-old winger from Southampton. So possibly it might be worth staying up until the 11 p.m. deadline to see if we can get that one over the line. I've got to be honest, I do think another option in the forward line, be it a winger or somebody that can play through the middle, is something I'd like to see. I still think we're a bit short up there. So hopefully business isn't done for the night. But given all this, the business that we've done for this summer, and if we go on the assumption that the two players I just mentioned, and that's our business done, how do you feel the squad's shaping up? There's been a lot of talk this summer that the squad's weaker than last season. I'm not sure I entirely agree with that. I guess time will tell. But do you think we're still short in certain areas, or do you think we're now got a squad that's capable of being competitive?
I think it'll be. I don't. It's a difficult one to argue whether we're weaker or not from last year. I guess the problem that we've got is we're still relying on a few very injury prone players here. If Yilmaz was still fit and Hefty was there, you've effectively got two players in the left back spot. Sterling has had little moments of being injured again, and you could argue that him and Tav would fight out for the right back. We've now got Proper and Balogun for the left centre half position. You've got Suter, and the new boy. I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name. Coming in for that right centre half position. I think the positions for me is midfield that we're a little bit light on. I think looking at a six to come in and sit there to allow the likes of maybe Barron and Diamandi to kind of escape further up the pitch would have been good to get in. Maybe a winger, because ultimately we're relying on Rabbi Matondo while Cortez is out injured. and Matondo's biggest problem has always been consistency, and whether he can string it together over a period of 3, 4, 5 games. And then you're always going to have people who just have a pop at Dessers because he misses the odd chance. So they would want a striker. I think Danilo coming back maybe takes the pressure off there a little bit, because we can at least begin to rotate him in and give Dessers a bit of time out the team. So I'm like you. I wouldn't necessarily agree that we're weaker than last year. Do we have enough quality? I think that's the little thing that I think we're lacking. It's that little bit of quality, that little bit of spark that provides us with a bit of magic. I think we've got that in Czerny. He looks really, really promising on the right hand side. If Dessers continues to score like he does and improve his performances like he did against Ross County, then I think him, Danilo and Ignamani, whenever we see him, would be good. But midfield is probably the area where I think we're most light, and would have loved us to sign somebody to bolster that out a little bit.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the kind of squad develops, because I think Clement was, I know nobody liked to hear it, but Clement was probably right when he said, the best of this squad will come in October, November. And we've seen that when he arrived in October. It took him once he got his ideas over the players, we've seen the result of that in the performance against Hearts at Ibrox last season. That was kind of the pinnacle of, what he'd been working up to that point. So it'll be interesting to see as the weeks and months develop. Now, away from transfers that might have escaped people's notice with all the excitement around deadline day, that there was a Europa League draw today. For Rangers, the kind of pick of the ties were Tottenham at home, Man U away, and Lyon at home. So there's a few tasty ties in there. What was your thoughts on the draw?
It felt more like a Champions League group, to be honest. I think the fact that we've got, Spurs at home and Man U away is potentially the two opening fixtures. Are going to be, they're the glamour games. Ultimately, it's going to be really difficult to judge what we need to get to progress, because it's a new format. I think I've seen various comments about maybe 9 or 10 points. And to be honest, again, if you look at it, Steaua Bucharest, Union, SG at home, should we be looking to win those games? Absolutely. So, Malmo away isn't going to be easy. Nice, again, it's one of these things. We've always done well in Europe, and even last year, going away to Betis and getting that result to kind of put us straight through to the last 16. I think a lot of people had wrote us off before that game. The key thing for me is that it's glad that I hope to goodness we'll be in Ibrox for the whole of the Europa League campaign, because ultimately that does give us a little bit of an advantage, especially when that stadium's noisy. So I think there's some really good games. There's some really good games in there. I think we've definitely got an opportunity to progress through. I think 9-10 points, looking at that with a little bit of luck, is definitely achievable. But I've got no idea if that's going to be enough or not, because I'm still trying to get my head around exactly what the bloody league looks like and how it all works. And
it'll be interesting to see what's your thoughts on the overall kind of this new format for European competition. I've got to be honest, I know we've not seen any games yet, so it's difficult to judge, but I quite like it. And at the minute, we're certainly getting a lot bigger ties in the group stages. Or the first round is, I guess it's no longer the group stages, but in the first round we'll certainly get a lot of glamour ties. I quite like it. But yeah, so far I'm a fan of it, but what do you think?
I think if you look at the changes, it's obviously been made because of the Super League stuff that had been kicked off. I think anything UEFA do these days to European competition is only to benefit the bigger clubs. And I think you look at the fact that we were in pot one in that group or in the groupings, and you look at the draw that we've come out with. Is there any real benefit of being a pot one team in a European competition now? And that was the thing that really, kind of buzzed through my head when I saw the draw. and the fact that you can still get two teams from the same pot you're in. So I don't know, mate, is the honest answer. I think change is always difficult, especially when the tried and tested format worked quite well. I'll be honest, I haven't even looked at qualification criteria, what happens, where you need to finish, anything like that yet. So I'll need to do that and then make a call on it. But for me, it just smacks that, the smaller teams in Europe are disadvantaged yet again by the structure and the setup that they've put in, and it's all built to continue to get your top 5 league teams through and into the latter stage of the competition because they're the ones that want the most money.
Yeah, and let's be honest, it comes down to money at the end of the day, really, as does most things. But I'm just looking forward to something a bit different and a bit new, so we'll see how it goes. Yeah. Now, we've got the small matter of an Old Firm game on Sunday. It might have escaped people's notice with everything else that's been going on this week. What's your confidence levels going into this game? I know the mood of the fans hasn't been at its highest of late in terms of the feeling and how people are feeling about the team and the squad and the lack of transfer business. But how are you feeling about this one?
Oh God, that's a $1 million question right there, Brian. I don't think confident is a word that I would use at the moment. I think if you were to offer me a 0-0 Warfest, I would take it right now to get out of there with a point. But form historically hasn't come into these games, or doesn't play as big a factor in these games as it could have done. But it all depends on how we're going to set up and whether we're going to be solid enough in the middle of the pitch. And I don't think I think a lot of people will probably wait until they see that starting lineup before they can actually decide how they feel about it, because at this moment in time we've got no idea how the hell we're going to set up and who's going to be playing. There's so many question marks and areas of concern that I think the manager seemingly hasn't learnt from in the previous games that he's played, because we've kind of almost done the same thing and got the same results. Now, I will caveat that by saying that had it not been for decisions within some of those games, that we wouldn't have walked away with a few more positive results than we actually got out of them. I think there's been some really dodgy decision making in all of this focus on referees giving decisions to Rangers. I think if you actually do the analysis and the figures, there's a lot more pro Celtic decisions in these games than there ever is pro Rangers, and that's the other thing that we've got to contend with, where we're going to be in a hostile stadium with none of our fans again. So it's going to be difficult for whatever team Clement picks. And I think everybody's just waiting to see if Tom Lawrence is going to start in the middle again.
Yeah. Does the manager have a bit of a conundrum for this one with James Tavernier, in that we've seen in previous games he's really struggled in these games against Maeda? So how does the manager go about trying to mitigate it? We know he's unlikely to drop him, and Alan Hutton had suggested in the week that Tav should maybe get, I think he said, rested for this game, but let's be honest, it would be dropped. And that's unlikely to happen. But how does the manager at least try and mitigate for some of those weaknesses?
I think if you look at how we set up and how we played against Ross County, that might be the way, where Tav pushes more into the middle and somebody goes back and covers his position. I think if you were to look at resting Tav, the only option that we've got in that squad at the moment is Sterling. Now, Sterling could absolutely cope with the physicality and the pace of Maeda, but then you're left with the conundrum of, he drops back and right back, who's going to be in the midfield? The only person that would step up at that point is Tom Lawrence. So we're kind of damned if we do and remove Tav out and stick Sterling in at right back, because immediately it kind of almost weakens the midfield by putting Tom Lawrence in there, who hasn't particularly shown up well in in these games. So I think it's going to be interesting. I think there is definitely a mental block between when first half when he comes up against Maeda. Even in the Kiev game, we saw him being outpaced a good few times, and that's a real big concern for the game at the weekend because you just know that Celtic are going to target him. So I think we've got to try and do something. I don't know if dropping him's the right answer, but because he can potentially be so come up with some big moments in these games. Yeah, I'm glad I'm not the manager.
Yeah, definitely a task I don't envy trying to pick the starting 11 for that one. A player that likely will start is Rabbi Matondo. Now he comes into it in pretty good after his performance against Ross County. Do you think he could be a good option in terms of an outball?
I think so. He's definitely got the pace to be able to hit players on it on the counter. I think the problem that we've got is that it can be so hit and miss, and I think that's the only concern. Now he did play really well against Ross County, but again we've got to remember it was Ross County. There's no doubt he's capable of moments of magic, like we've seen when he scored against Celtic previously. But it does really come down to how we're going to set up on the day. Clement's kind of almost intimated that we weren't. It's not like we're going to go there and park the bus and kind of hit on the counter. But you're right. This is the type of game where it probably does suit Matondo because he is going to have more space to run into. He's not going to be playing against a packed defence like he would be against a Ross County or a kind of a Dundee-ish type team where they'll maybe come to Ibrox and sit off us. So, having that space to run into, the ability to play in behind might suit him. It's just which version of Rabbi Matondo is gonna turn up. Is it going to be the one that can, set up a couple of goals and score a couple like he did against Ross County, or is it going to be the guy that couldn't tap a bag of cement and run the ball out of play? It's just unfortunately the word that is missing from him is consistency. But his pace is certainly something that we could utilise to hit them on the break.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned Sterling before. Now, for me, it's crucial that he's in midfield. We've seen in the last few Old Firm games that we've lost the midfield battle, and that's where the game's been won and lost. So for me, Sterling's a must start in there. Do you think he could be the key in that midfield for us?
Again, it comes back to where we think the bigger issue is going to be as a team. Do we think that Tav Maeda battle is going to be bigger than the midfield? I think O'Reilly leaving certainly leaves a big gap in that Celtic midfield. I don't think their new signings will be pitched straight into an Old Firm game either. So, who are they going to replace him with? Is it likely going to be Bernardo that then comes into that? Which potentially does give us less to worry about, given O'Reilly was so influential in some of those games that we've played. I think the one thing that's been really interesting for me with Sterling is that when he has went into midfield, I don't think he's really been the sitter, which has been very interesting for me. Barron's the one that has been going to get the ball, and I think that comes down to probably the limitations in Sterling's game, where maybe his range of passing isn't suited to playing in the middle of the pitch. He'll give you physicality, he'll give you the pace and the power, but he's not necessarily the best at using the ball. You can win it and then just pop it off to somebody that can, but is he going to be that player that drops between the centre back like Barron and look at that pass that breaks the line? I don't think he's got that in his game yet. And I think that's the only worry with having him in midfield. He would definitely strengthen it, but it's the use of the ball when he gets it. If it was to be a Barron, Sterling, and Diamande midfield, I'd probably want Sterling to be the sitter and let Barron and Diamande try and push and support the attack because they've got the energy to do the box to box role. There's no doubt about that. And Sterling can almost cover Tav and do that switch. If Tav comes into the middle of the pitch, Sterling's got the pace to then deal with Maeda and whoever's going to be coming down their left hand side to attack Tav. So it's a bit of a conundrum because you've probably got two areas there where one player could fill both gaps. It's just which gap's the biggest one and where can he fit best.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting when those team lineups come out about an hour before kick-off. I think that'll give us a really good indication of how this game might go. Before we go, Rob, I'll get a score prediction from you if you're feeling brave.
Score draw.
Oh, sitting on the fence there.
Absolutely, mate. I've got splinters in my arse.
Okay, we'll see how it goes.
What about you? What are you thinking? You can't. I'm not letting you away with that.
I'm going to go confident. I'm going to go 2-0 Rangers.
Oof. Loving it.
Dessers at the double.
Happy days.
Why not? Stranger things have happened.
Well, hopefully, mate. I hope you're right.
Right, I think we'll call it time there. All that's left for me to do is thank my guest, Rob. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, and thanks everybody for listening. I hope we have a couple more signings to drool over before this window slams shut, and hopefully we can get a 2-0 victory with a Dessers double at the weekend. I might see what the odds are for that.
Yeah, don't listen to me for betting odds, to be honest. Hey, as always, guys, we live tonight on the YouTube channel, and the show will be available on all podcasting platforms: iTunes, Spotify, Acast, and Stitcher. We'll be back on Sunday evening. It'll be myself, Stuart, and possibly one other to look back at all the action from Sunday's Old Firm match. Until next time, bye for now.